Hello everyone, welcome to World Humanities. Over the next 15 weeks we're going to take a tour of a variety of cultures from throughout the world, and we're going to look at the art, music, literature, and really cultures as a whole from a wide range of places. This slideshow is going to introduce how the class will work. I'll tell you a little bit about my own background, and we'll also take a quick view of all of the areas that we're going to be studying this semester. So I invite you to get ready to set out on a grand adventure as we explore countries from across the globe. Now, before we do that, please allow me to introduce myself to all of you. Hi everybody, I am Ms. Dollard, or otherwise known as Ms. D to my online students, and I have been teaching online since the early days of online education. It's always so exciting to me to take on a new course because I have a certain way that I go about arranging online classes that I believe makes them easiest for you all to comprehend. My goal is to keep it simple for you and to provide a really interesting learning experience. Now, there's certain things that comprise my online class. One would be the discussions. Each week we have a discussion question. Now, the discussion questions in my classes might make you think a little deeply about subjects. I like to get below the surface, sort of obvious questions, and look at things that we can see from a variety of points of view so that, maybe we disagree, because that makes a more interesting discussion. We'll also have reading every week, but I'm going to take the reading and I'm going to present slide lectures. So hopefully it won't be just boring reading through the chapters. I must say though, I have read this textbook over the summer, and this is a subject that I have studied for all of my adult life. But I read the textbook and I found it fascinating, because what they do in the textbook is they cover not only the art of these societies, but they also talk about the religious influences, the history, and it's really a fun way to learn about societies other than our own. But I'm going ahead of myself. Before we move on, I'm going to here I am, right? I'm going to invite you to visualize me like this, because here I am, a little goofy, like to have fun. I love to make art. That's what I do. I'm talking to you now from my art studio, which is where I work from. So maybe you can visualize me like this. But if you're having a rough day and you need to cheer yourself up, I have another idea of how you might choose to visualize your instructor. Well, hello, there I am. That's my self-portrait as an Ella human. And I must say, it's a pretty good likeness. I did it a few years back, and really, it's just silly, but I'm a big believer in bringing in humor whenever we can, because life is serious enough. Oh my goodness, college is really serious. So we'll look at some heady subjects and some deep thinking, but hopefully we can also find plenty of time to laugh this semester. But moving on, here's another way to visualize your instructor, and this is me at home. I live in the Ozark Mountains where I have an art studio. I'm speaking to you from my art studio, and that's my home, which is on another part of my property, which is in the mountains, in the woods. And I really love being in the mountains, but I also love to go to the city. I spend quite a bit of time in Kansas City, and I go back and forth between mountain life and city life, and that works really well for me. Okay, so that's enough about me. If you want to know more about how the course is structured, do please read the welcome post on the home page and let me know if you have any questions. Now, there's one more thing that is unique to this class. This is the first time that I've taught this class as an online course, and I'm so excited to do this. And that means that you all, as the students, really get a great opportunity, because when I teach an online course for the first time, well, I give it a lot of extra attention. I'm really seeking out the best videos for you. I'm looking at the best ways to assign content. And it's a nice small class, so you'll get a lot of attention. Now, having said that, I'm always open to contact. So I encourage you to contact me through email with any questions. If I do not respond within a day, really most weekends as well, if I do not respond within 24 hours, please call the number on the syllabus, because I do check email daily, and sometimes, occasionally, an email gets lost in the system. But let's move on, because we have a lot to cover in our 15-minute video. Let's take a tour around where we're going to be going over the next 15 weeks. First, let's go back to ancient Mexico, Olmec culture, where we have these colossal heads. Now, these are pretty amazing. They were made from 900 to 1200 BC. So, in other words, a really long time ago. And they're 7.5 feet high. And as in many of these works that we study, my big question is, how did they do that? So these are people at like 1200 BC who are carving these stones into these colossal heads. There's a whole bunch of them with the Olmec culture. So now let's move on down to Peru in our quick history. These are fascinating. Okay, so it's a bird, no big deal. What if I told you that the wingspan across the wings was as big as a football field? Okay? That's how big they are. They're mysterious on these really remote plains in Peru. Of course, you could probably look online and you'd find out that aliens did it, but I don't think aliens did it. Oh, and what we're looking at with this slide and the last slide is our first lesson, which is Art of the Americas. And let me speak for a minute about the lessons. I really believe in cutting your online content into weekly segments, because they're really easy to eat and assimilate that way. So each week you do have a new lesson, and sometimes I break the chapters up. Also, I will do my best to give you certain pages to read and not assign the entire long chapter if I can help it. So let's whip on through our tour of the Americas. This is a Northwest Indian carving of ivory, so that would probably be maybe a walrus tusk from the Northwest Indians. Now, my early degree is in Northwest Indian Studies, or really Native American Studies. So that's an area where I have a lot of interest. So this one is about 200 in our current era is when it was made. Let's go to the 1950s. And here's another one, a piece from the Haida Indians. And that's from the 20th century. So now we're going to move on to the art of South Asia and Southeast Asia. And this is a beautiful thing. This is called the Great Stupa at Sanchi. And it was built for the monks to walk around and around and around as they contemplated whatever it is that monks contemplate. Probably just being in the moment and putting one foot in front of another. You know, that's a pretty good way to live. So let's move on to this incredible wonder. And this is Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Now, this is an incredible temple complex that is one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So that's what we're going to do for our special project at midterm. You're going to be assigned to do a visual and a written report on one of these UNESCO World Heritage cultural sites. And there's hundreds of them throughout the world. I'll give you more information on that forthcoming. And the other main additional assignment is going to be a final creative assignment. And I will give you more information on that also. Now, I've been teaching a long time, and I've found that sometimes if I say creative assignment, people get scared. But don't worry, because you'll have an opportunity to either visit an art museum or write another paper if you don't want to do the creative assignment. So let's move on here, because we have to rush through this, and we're going to go to Africa. This is a head of a Yoruba leader from, I think, around 1400. Now, the Yoruba culture was incredibly complex and advanced, and we'll look more at that in Africa. And then what we also have is a head from the 20th century, again from Africa. Okay, now let's move on to Islamic culture. This is a mosaic mihrab, And that's where it's like a prayer niche. And check out the mosaic here. This, I believe, is from, I don't know, about 1600. I don't have the date in front of me, but I believe that's right. And then we have this one also, which is from the Mosque of Sultan Salim, which would be around 1600. Now, the next ones that I'm going to look at, I find fascinating. Look at these musical instruments. Now, I love music. I play music. I listen to music. I'm around a lot of live music when I go to Kansas City. And what is so fascinating about this is that these bells were made in 433 BC. They're China. So we've popped from, let's see, Southeast Asia to Africa to the Islamic world, and now we're in China. But I wanted to show you these bells because they're so fascinating to me that they were forged and created, and they still have a good tone. What is that? How many years later? 2,500 years later. Wow. I find that fascinating. I love to consider what human beings have been able to do throughout history. Okay, so now let's just move on along since we're in China, and we'll go to the Humble Administrator's Garden. Now, this is something that was rebuilt in the 1700s. Often in China and in Japan, they take their heritage sites and they rebuild them, continually using them and renovating them. But I do want you to notice this beautiful curve of the roof, which is something that's common in Chinese and in some Japanese architecture, and we don't find it so much in Western architecture. So this is a place that is designed for contemplation, peace, and reflection, obviously. I would love to visit that someday. Hey, let's pop over to Polynesia. Now, Polynesia is interesting because really what it means is a whole bunch of islands, right? Poly is many. So when we study Polynesia, we're going to look at Australia, New Zealand, Micronesia, etc., on and on. But this is a house pillar from New Zealand. And you can see here this very common characteristic of these kind of swirling lines. And often they use them also with tattoos, which is part of their tradition. So let's pop over to Japan as we wind down our tour. I love this. I mean, I say that about a lot of them, as you will find, but I've always really loved this piece. It's the priest Kuya, and he's preaching. But he's preaching to say the name of Buddha over and over again. So out of his mouth, all these Buddhas are coming. And I just think that's delightful. So let's move on to one of my favorites, another. And this is called Bull with Puppy. And it's from the 1800s, but check it out. Look at the little puppy. I mean, that's just a beautiful ink painting. And lastly, we are going to end with one of the most famous works, which is The Cresting Wave by Hokusai. And this brings us back to the whole notion of the cycle of life. One of the things I love about this painting, well, there's many things. You know, it kind of reminds people of this common yin-yang symbol. But in addition, think of the guys in the boat. These are these little bitty people right here, see? And they are paddling for all they've got, with all they've got, as this wave crests overhead. And yet there's the peaceful Mount Fuji in the background. And this is a very famous woodblock print. And there are still actually many of these original copies around, and it's been copied sort of endlessly, you know, in other ways. So as we look at human beings and how they express their culture from around the world, I hope that you will return to something that we all share, which is our humanity, our humanness, for lack of a better word. And that's one of the things that I would hope that you can get out of this course. As we take this great adventure around the world, what is it that we share as human beings? What is it that are the differences that make it interesting? I use a saying all the time, which is many flowers in the garden. And maybe I say that when someone seems a little odd to me, But there are many flowers in the garden, and I look forward to celebrating that as we study the culture